TapestryX is a real-time distributed transaction and accounting ledger for networks and digital ecosystems. In this video, we will cover capital markets, but TapestryX is process, lifecycle, asset, and transaction agnostic, so it could be configured for markets, payments, supply chain, records management, ERP, or even voting. At a high level, TapestryX is a differentiating distributed ledger technology. It is real-time. We use a combination of blockchain methods, operation controls, and accounting to produce the automated event-driven ledger synchronization. It is high performance. It is linearly scalable, and it has a high capacity throughput. It has double entry accounting, and with that, transacting periods, which allow us to record future dated obligations. TapestryX is interoperable with legacy infrastructure or other networks. The airlock can act as a means for the participants to bring value in and out of the network or settle transactions with parties that are outside the network. And it can also be used to settle transactions between networks. This also allows you to implement at large or small scale and then grow from there. TapestryX has a real-time proof of consistency and completeness without the need for mining, consensus, or independent validation. No other distributed ledger technology solution has all these capabilities. So, now looking at the system, we see we've actually got 4 nodes on separate tabs deploying their own version of the software. In this case, State Street is acting as the airlock to Morgan Stanley, HSBC, and Goldman Sachs. And please don't be fooled, State Street is not a central authority here. This is just a view of the network according to State Street. If we look at the next node, which is Morgan Stanley, you'll see the topology as understood by Morgan Stanley. So each node has an overview tab, has a transactions tab, has our proprietary automated self-synchronization method, which you can find out about at the end of the video. And we have a complete ownership lot record. Now this is important because we separate transactions and balances. Classic blockchains are not ledgers. They're hash-linked timestamp transfers of ownership. They also have unsustainable active memory requirements. You have to keep the whole ledger in active memory from its inception to the current date because the only record of any transfer is in the block where it was created. TapestryX has the concept of a starting balance, a transaction, and an ending balance. This allows you to archive the transacting periods and carry forward the balances. With the double entry accounting, we can also record future dated payables and receivables or obligations. With TapestryX, our active memory is only today's balances and today's or any future dated transactions. Back to the system, each node also has a balance monitoring and trial balance tab, which we'll cover when we discuss accounting later. Looking at the transactions, it's important to recognize that although the nodes are shown, the individual transacting parties are kept confidential. There's just anonymous asset lot IDs being transferred between nodes. A transacting party has multiple trading relationships today with their counterparties in a network. They'll also have multiple clearance and settlement relationships with each node because they can settle their assets in any node, knowing that from any one node, they can confidentially retrieve the data of the entire ledger. Transactions are recorded on TapestryX by the counterparties creating what we call Contra Transactions. For every deliver, there's a receive, and for every buy, there's a sell. So looking here, a client in Morgan Stanley is selling BMW, 7,500 BMW for 712,500 euros. So let's take a look closer at how this is done. We join the transaction after execution. TapestryX is a post-execution recording system. So with both parties, they'll engage through the system transaction entry point server, or steps. So from there, they will get the real-time synchronization process and the reference asset lot data. At that point, they can swap data in the steps process with their counterparty and create the Contra Transactions and have the nodes digitally sign each of the transactions. So from this, on one side, we have a buy and a sell, and on the other side, we have a sell and a buy. Effectively, both parties are allowed to confirm both sides of the transaction and record them to their respective nodes. The nodes act as a separate control process on the created transactions, but having processed the transactions in their accounting, each node will broadcast its individual transaction related to its transacting counterparty. The receipt of that broadcast from each of the other nodes is a confirmation that the network knows about both sides of the transaction. But remember, at the point of creation of transactions, you've got a digitally signed transaction from both sides. For any of the other nodes in this network, all they have to do is receive those transactions, match, validate, and post them, because the ledger self-synchronizes. It's important to note that with our generic scripting process, utilizing 5 fundamental transaction types, we can create any transaction or transaction lifecycle, and therefore we get a consistency of process as well as accounting. If we go to the Goldman Sachs node, if we want to look at all nodes, and we'll increase the number of transactions per page. We should be able to scroll down and see, here's an interesting thing. So we're actually going to show you Morgan Stanley is delivering to State Street, the airlock, euros to buy a French corporate bond. So there's basically the receipt in. You can see the external transfer from State Street, receiving it in. And then, interesting enough, Morgan Stanley then sells it to Goldman Sachs. So this is just a normal buy and sell of the corporate bond versus euros. But subsequently, Goldman has a counterparty who it sells to, so then it delivers the corporate bond versus euros to State Street. Now, I made all the amounts the same, but you can imagine in a market situation there'd be different prices and different transfers. With accounting, we'll show 2 things that are possible here. We'll come back to this BMW trade, just look at the accounting. If we scroll up a bit, remember, because we said we've got payable receivables and future dated transactions, here is a foreign exchange between a client at Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs, where the client at Morgan Stanley is selling Indian rupees and buying US dollars. But you can see that the date created is 1 day before the day it's going to actually settle. This was done in the past, it's would have settled by now, but we're just showing you the fact that you can actually record the payable receivable obligation. Note that the transaction type is marked as an obligation versus a transfer. If you're looking at the BMW transaction, we can click on the journals, and we do nostro vostro accounting. So when you look at a transaction, you've actually got a debit against the asset lot ID. This is the confidential ID of the asset lot, so the owner's not revealed, against a ledger account. And then there's a statement account and an offset. So it shows you that the statement, this is an outgoing transaction from the node. So the statement records all the activity across a node, and the ledger records the activity versus the ledgers. And then we actually show, when we process the journals, we actually reconcile them and link the transactions. But you can see this, obviously the Morgan Stanley is a debit of the BMW. And if we go and look at the other side, the Contra transaction, HSBC has a credit versus its ledger. So each of these accounting are actually generated and processed by each node, and the accounting is actually hashed into part of the immutable record of the transaction. On the other side of the euros, if you look at the accounting, you've got Morgan Stanley receiving the euros, which is 712,500. But from the other side, we'll actually see a bit more accounting, because from the Morgan Stanley side, they actually debited and passed on the 712,500, but they had a $75 million asset lock. So at that point, rather than just reducing the asset lock, we effectively debit it with the net amount and create a new net asset lock that Morgan Stanley would keep. The point being, though, is that we can handle multiple asset lots for deliveries, the multiple asset lots if they want to break it into smaller asset lots that they receive, and even any net retained asset lots can be pushed into smaller chunks. We can also take asset lots and aggregate them if they want to. And then the processing of the asset lots can be done smallest to largest. It can be done LIFO, FIFO, and also largest to smallest, and then by client choice. So actually with our asset lots and those choices, TapestryX is already preset to support tax lot accounting. Now, with all the journals that are shown on those transactions, we can actually run trial balances, meaning we can show that for every ledger debit there was a statement credit, and for every ledger credit there was a statement debit, and we're matching them, so this becomes trial balances. Now it happens that one transaction versus BMW was the only one you saw, so you can see the trial balance here, and we ensure that it's matched on an event-driven basis. Then you take a look at the balance monitoring. This is actually tracking the value in each node and in the network as a whole. So if we look at Morgan Stanley and we look at US dollars, you can see that Morgan Stanley's node is at the moment controlling 90.6 million US dollars, although there's slightly less than 250 million in the network as a whole. This particular line tracks the gross turnover, and then we've got a series of ones looking at the payable receivables within all the nodes through the airlock, and then ultimately within Morgan Stanley's node. If you remember, Morgan Stanley had this receivable for the FX of the Indian rupees versus the US dollars with the Goldman Sachs client. So if we actually go and look at Goldman Sachs and get US dollars again, the total in the network should stay the same. This value will change because Goldman has a different value. Gross turnover should be the same, but you'll notice that the payable will jump up to the receivable. Sorry, the receivable will jump up to the payable. So again, Goldman has slightly less than 20 million, but the total in the network is the same. So this way, we're running trial balances and monitoring the balance of all the assets in the network, all confidentially, but on an aggregate gross basis. So we're synchronizing not just in the blockchain methodology, but on the accounting as well. So there you have a quick review of TapestryX production system. But the key things to remember are that it's real time, it has high performance, it has the double entry accounting that allows transacting periods to be archived and future dated obligations to be recorded in the immutable record. And it's interoperable with legacy infrastructure and other networks, which then allows it to be implemented flexibly at a large or small scale and grow at any pace you want to. Another important thing to recognize is that TapestryX requires no customized code, whether it's the node, the participants, the assets, or the transactions are all configurable. And then the APIs to record transactions or read your reporting or accounting are defined by those configurations. The most important point to remember, though, is that with this automated self-synchronizing methodology, the transacting parties only have to worry about what they do today. That is, load their transactions and read their reporting or accounting all in real time on an event-driven basis. Now, if you want to learn about our academic research-backed proof of consistency and completeness that avoids the need for mining, consensus, or independent validators, you're just going to have to get in touch with us. Thank you for watching. As the Internet Protocol made communication consistent, TapestryX will do the same for the secure recording and transfer of digital assets. Find out more information or ask for a demo at our website, tapestryx.com. Thank you.